Hey, I'm Josh, I'm from Support Department, and today I'm going to take you through a novel approach to onboarding new customers into your Bubble app. That's new paid customers into your Bubble app that go via Stripe. So this is an approach that I came up with for a client recently, and I thought it might be an interesting one to share with you all because it does definitely cut down a lot of the steps and makes it super easy to convert those customers that are unknown to you into paying customers with an account set up. The basic flow is that your logged out user will be on your page. They click buy, they'll get redirected to a Stripe hosted checkout where they'll put in their information, their credit card details, and start their subscription, or it could be a one-off payment. They'll then get transferred back to Bubble where their account will have already been created for them with all of the necessary information pulled across from Stripe, and all they'll need to do is to set their password to then enter your app. So let's get into it. We'll start with a demonstration first off. All right, so what we have here is a clone of my landing page for Support Department, but what I'll do first is take you into the Bubble editor, and let's go into the data tab. Let's look at our app data, and we have no users created. What we have is the index page here. We also have a login page, which is where the users are redirected to when they come back from Stripe. And I'll take you through the workflows and so forth in a moment, but let's jump into it and see exactly how it works. So if we scroll down and we come to this plan here, and I'm logged out. As you've just seen, there's no users in that database, and I'll click start now. So I'm redirected to a Stripe checkout. So just in our test mode here, and I'm going to put in my details. So a little trick for anybody that's working with Stripe integrations is to save a credit card with all of those 424242 to your browser to make it very easy to pull that back when you're doing your testing. All right, so now I'm going to hit subscribe. My payment is going to get processed and I'm going to get sent back to Bubble. Okay, so I'll take you through the logic in a second, but what you can see here is that I'm logged in as this user at the moment. I wouldn't normally have it there, but I've just put that there just to demonstrate what's going on with the workflow, and it will become clear in a second. All right, so I'm going to suggest a new password. I'm going to create my account. I've now been set up and my email address has been changed to the email address that I put into the Stripe checkout. And I'm now logged in and ready to go. Okay, so how does that work? You can see that I now have this user entry here where we've recorded my country, my Stripe customer ID, my name, the subscription ID from that subscription that I just set up, and we've recorded the email address which was put into that Stripe form. So if we come into the workflows, I've kept this very simple. When you're clicking that button on the page, these are the steps that happen. So we are creating an account. Now, to create an account in Bubble, you do need to put in an email address, which is in an email format for it to be accepted. But at this point in time, we don't know what the user's email address is because they won't put it in until they get to the Stripe step. So I'm just creating a random string here and putting in you can put in anything that you like here, but this is just for me to identify in my database that this is a user that has been created, but hasn't yet finalized the step in Stripe yet. Okay, then what I'm going to do is create a magic link. We're then using the result of that account that I've just created, the email address from that account, and I'm going to send that user back to the login page when that magic link is loaded. And if there's any failure, then they'll just end up back on the home page. But I have clicked just create link, don't send an email. So all of this stuff in here, the subject and the body, is irrelevant because all I want is the URL. I don't want to send an email to anybody because of course I don't have the email for that particular user. Now, I always use Stripe APIs directly on all of my projects. I don't use any plugins because I just find it easier for me to do that. I have a whole bunch of API calls set up here that I'm going to use. I'm going to use a couple of them in this particular case, but one of them is create a checkout session. Now here we just have a few parameters from our API call, and we're not using all of them in this particular case. This is an API call that I've set up for most of my projects, so I'm not using all of them, but let's just quickly run through it. So the success URL is just the URL of where you want to send the user to once they've successfully completed that checkout session. So they've made a successful payment. Now in this case, we're going to be using the magic link that we've just created. So this is the key step to get this all to work. So this is how we can get our user to be logged in when they come back to our app, because we're sending them to that login page with a magic link, which is going to log them in for us. Now, if they don't make a successful payment, then they'll just go back to that page, the home page in this case, from where they've started. Now, we also need to send across the price ID. So I have an option set here. That's just the price ID of the subscription. And I'm also sending over the unique ID of the user that I've just created. So this is the unique ID from the database. Now in my API call, the way that it's set up, I can send a Stripe customer ID across or pre-fill an email address. I don't have either of these and they're set to optional, so that's why I've left those blank. Not really relevant in this particular case. So this will create a checkout session, and then we'll need to redirect that user to that checkout session. So we're just going to send them to the URL which is created. Now, if we come across to our login page, what we've got here is when they click to create an account, where they haven't set a password yet, they've been signed in with that magic link. So we need to assign a temporary password to that user. We can then update that user's credentials using that temporary password to make it all happen, and then taking those input fields from that particular form where they set their password. And then we can schedule a backend workflow to update the email address to the one that they provided in Stripe. And then we can, in this case, we're just changing what's on the screen to say everything has been confirmed. So the missing link in all of this is a webhook, which pulls that information in from Stripe when that checkout session is completed as well. So let's jump into our backend workflows. And we've got two API workflows. So the one that we just went through there, which is triggered on the login page when they set their password, and that just basically updates the email address and pulls in the email address that they told us in the Stripe checkout. But first of all, what we have is a webhook that is set up. So whenever there is a checkout session which is successfully completed in Stripe, it will trigger this API workflow, and it will update the details of our user. So you'll remember when we set up our Stripe checkout session, we passed across the unique ID for the particular user. We will search for the user in our database based off that unique ID, which we passed across. And then once we've found that user, we can pull in the country, because we know the country from where that payment was processed. We can update the name, the Stripe customer ID, and the Stripe subscription ID, and store that all in our user account. By the time the user actually click to make the payment, and then they get redirected back to your Bubble app, this webhook in the meantime is firing on the Stripe side. You're catching it in the back end of your Bubble app, and you're updating all of those details. Now, you might ask, why don't we update the email address at the same time to remove having that second step? Of course, if we change the email address here and not as a second step, our magic link will actually be voided in the process and the user won't be logged in. This all happens too quick. So by the time the user comes back and then they're ready to log into that page, all of this information would have been updated. So their email address would have been changed, and then the magic link won't work. So that's why we trigger this workflow when the user clicks to set their password. We will just make a quick call to the Stripe API, because we've already got their Stripe customer ID saved on their user record, and we will just pull down their user record from Stripe, and then we will update their email address for them. So that's why the kind of rubbish temporary email address was showing up at the beginning when the page loaded, and then after they had seen the success screen, you will have noticed that the email address would have been updated. This is the general approach, and I won't go through all of the details about setting up Stripe webhooks and so forth. There are some tweets that I have done recently at the time of creating this video, at least, that do go through and provide some information about how to set up webhooks, and there are several guides around. Now, it is also worth mentioning that this is a fairly advanced implementation. Each of these steps are not very difficult to pull off, but there are a number of different things that are happening here. So I would suggest that if any of this makes you uncomfortable and you're not familiar with working with webhooks and magic links and all of these sorts of things, then I would suggest that perhaps you hold off from implementing this, because there are two things in a Bubble app which in any app really, which I would strongly encourage you to make sure are foolproof. And one of those is authentication, and the other is taking payment from your customers. Now, if either of those fail, those are things that you need to be able to fix very quickly. So you need to understand those inside out. And perhaps if there are bugs elsewhere in your app that you can't resolve right away, it's not the end of the world. So I would think in this case that if you're struggling to follow what I've gone through here, if you're a junior Bubble developer, then I would suggest that you make sure you understand each of these concepts in detail first before you go to implement this, because what I would hate to see is that there is a step which is skipped or not implemented properly, and then you're going to struggle to sign up new users and take payment from them. So that's just my little guidance for you there. Okay, so I wish you all the best of implementing this in your own app. Let me know what you think. Bye.